Sure. Hey, everybody. Salam. Nice to meet everybody. Thank you so much to the organizers. This has been an amazing event, and thank you all for staying this late to hear us chat. My name is Iman Abuzeid. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Incredible Health. Incredible Health is the largest software and AI company in healthcare hiring. We are headquartered in San Francisco, and we operate nationally. Just a little bit more about us. Our vision is to help healthcare professionals live better lives. Our mission is to help healthcare professionals find and do their best work. We have grown to over 1.5 million US healthcare workers, including nurses and allied health professionals, using our apps. We also work with 1,500 US healthcare employers, including large ones like Tenet Health, Trinity Health, academic medical centers like Johns Hopkins and New York Presbyterian, lots of community hospitals too. And we have 3 key products. We have a 2-sided marketplace where employers use our software to hire healthcare workers into permanent roles. And we also have AI voice agents, including a voice agent that can do interviewing on behalf of employers. And we also have voice agents that help healthcare workers practice their interviews and create the resumes so they can expand their opportunities. We've raised $100 million for the company. And the company was last valued at $1.6 billion. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
Wow, thanks so much for sharing all of that. And first of all, I just want to thank you for being here. It's a Eid weekend. I think, for everyone here, thanks so much for coming. When we were organizing this, we weren't sure if this was the weekend that would hit, but this is a testament to, how much community means to us. So thanks again for being here. I've known you a little bit over a decade now, and it's been really amazing to see you on this journey. And I just want to say, on behalf of Sudanese people all over the world, you're an inspiration to a lot of us.
Thank you.
And thanks for honoring us. But you told us a little bit about Incredible Health, but I do want to start kind of at the beginning of the journey, right? Your father was an ENT physician. You grew up kind of in Saudi to start. Tell me a little bit about those early years, your upbringing. When you think back on those early years, how did that tie into your experiences? How did that shape your ambition?
Yeah, like all of us here, our families, our upbringing shaped who we are today, right? I was born my parents were Sudanese. I was born in Riyadh, and I grew up in Riyadh. I moved to London when I was 18 years old. That's where I went to medical school. And I moved to New York City when I was 24 years old. That's when I immigrated to the US. I'd say there were a few different influences. First is my grandfathers, both of them. One grandfather was, he started as one of Sudan's first transportation companies in the 70s. Another grandfather was a serial entrepreneur in real estate. He owned gas stations. He had multiple businesses. And so they were definitely an inspiration. The second is just my father, like several of us here, like my father's from a tiny village in northern Sudan and worked really, really hard to become a successful surgeon. And my mother really instilled in us a insistence on excellence and hard work and being the best in your field and resilience. So I'm a member of I have 4 siblings. Mashallah, like all of them have done very well. 2 of them are here. So shout out to Iman Abuzeid and Iman Abuzeid. And I have a very supportive family. Like many of the panelists reference, of course, my parents were like, what? Entrepreneur, what is this? What are you doing? But are now, of course, very supportive. And then I have an amazing husband, Yusuf, who's also in the room. So, it takes a village to make something like this happen.
No, I understand that. You kind of touched on this, but your career spans so many different worlds. You talked about consulting, medicine, business school, and ultimately entrepreneurship. Looking back now, which of those experiences turned out to matter the most?
I'll be honest, at the end of the day, these were all stepping stones to what I'm ultimately doing now. And so they were all formative experiences. So when I finished medical school, I went into management consulting. I worked at McKinsey, at Booz Allen. That's really where I got exposed to hospital operations and hospital strategy, and that exposed me to like the business part of healthcare. So that was an enormous amount of skill building during that time. Then I did my MBA at Wharton, and that was a place where I got exposed to a much larger group of entrepreneurs, including software entrepreneurs. It's where I learned finance and accounting and negotiations. Like these are skills I use every single day. And that's where I decided I need to get to the San Francisco Bay Area. Like I knew I wanted to build in tech. Being in San Francisco at the end of the day, even today, is still the tech capital of the world. And so I needed to be in that ecosystem. When I first moved to the Bay Area, I didn't know much. I had no experience in software. And so I worked at an early stage healthcare technology company as a product manager. And that's where I learned to work with engineers and data scientists and designers and what it takes to actually build great software products and make them delightful and drive their growth. It's also where I met my co-founder. So I was a product manager. Rome Portlock was a software engineer. Rome is a software engineer who went to MIT. He's a total whiz. And so we left that company to co-found what is Incredible Health.
Wow. So you moved to the Bay Area, you worked in tech, you decided to start Incredible Health. But when we were younger, did you imagine that you would build a company one day? Or did that idea kind of come up later?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do want to say that, look, at the end of the day, there are 1,000 paths to entrepreneurship. There is no specific set of steps or paths that are required. I'm only just sharing one path, like my story. So again, like it's entrepreneurship is one of those cool things that's like there's so many ways to get there. I think for me, there was really a lot of there were multiple influences at the time. So a lot of my family members and friends are doctors, surgeons that practice here in the U.S. They were often complaining about understaffing, and at the same time, Rome, my co-founder, came from a family of nurses, and they were all saying, "Hey, I'm experienced and I'm qualified, and I applied to 10 places, and I usually don't even hear back." And we were like, "Okay, this doesn't make any sense, right?" So we started to dig into it. We started to we uncovered that the mindset and the process and the technology and just the way things were being done was just like nothing's changed in over 20 years, and we just figured there just has to be a better way.
And sounds like you kind of mentioned, so early on, you were really thinking about medicine, you dipped your toes in the business world. But as you pivoted from medicine to entrepreneurship, I'm a practicing physician. You graduate medical school. Medical school's not easy. But you stepped away from this demanding path, the path that usually our relatives are very happy about. What prompted that decision? Was it a hard one? Was it something you knew very early on?
Yeah, I think the initial idea to start a business one day, actually, I started having those thoughts during medical school. And don't get me wrong, like a career as a physician is a great career, right? Like our parents are not crazy, right? Like it makes sense. It's a very good career. But for me, I didn't necessarily want to just have an impact to like one patient at a time. And I think with software and with entrepreneurship, like you can have an impact on a much, much bigger scale. Every day, even when I'm here, even when I'm sleeping, millions of users are being impacted through our company. And you just don't get that kind of scale working as a clinician day to day.
Were you scared? Many physicians, many people try and solve hard problems, and they never actually take that leap and start a company. What made you decide to take that risk?
For me, it was like a risk not to do it. I was like, okay, I got to do this I need to work as a doctor for the next 20, 40 years. Like,
you're not wrong.
I was like, I can't do it. So it was a risk it was a bigger issue to not do it. If I'm being honest. The other part is just like, you just have to start. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to sit here and claim that there wasn't, of course, there was fear and self-doubt and all those feelings that all of us feel. And you just have to overcome them. You just have to get started. And it doesn't mean you have to have everything figured out, but you have to get started and you have to be comfortable with failing. And we can talk about some of the bigger failures that happen, because this is not all like, sunshine and rainbows. But you just have to just go for it.
And I like that. We've heard that, time and time again on each panel, that you should have to start. and you'll figure it out along the way. But I think it's that first leap of taking that risk, overcoming that fear, that can like land you in really sweet zones. And you did mention you did finish your medical training, and I'm wondering, like, despite not practicing as a physician, did it give you a different lens as a founder compared to someone that came from purely a technology background, right? So like Rome is your tech co-founder, he's MIT trained, he's more on the technical side. Did that medical background really help infuse your thinking?
It absolutely did. So I would say the medical background did two things in particular. Like it gave me a lot of credibility and more empathy, right? So on the credibility piece, as you can imagine, like I have to interact with CEOs and COOs of these health systems. And the moment you walk in the room, you have an MD, like they're immediately going to give you credibility, whether you deserve it or not. That's the kind of world that it is. And then on the empathy piece, having been a healthcare worker and being surrounded by family members that are healthcare workers, like these are some of the most overworked and underappreciated workers in the country are in healthcare. And to have that level of empathy and to understand their world definitely shaped how we built the product. It shaped our vision and mission of helping healthcare professionals live better lives and helping them find and do their best work. It's when you're part of that world, you understand them, you understand their jargon, you understand their problems, and therefore you're well equipped to bring them amazing solutions. Now, having said that, this is not like a solo journey. I'm not on my own. I'm a big believer in building amazing teams that come from a diverse set of backgrounds in terms of their experience. It's important to have an amazing software engineering team and machine learning team and data science, right? It's important to have sales and customer success that are true experts in their field, and operations and finance. Like at the end of the day, like it's a team effort to build something like this. And one of the most important things I do is to assemble a world-class team.
Yeah, and just you told us a little bit about what Incredible Health does, but maybe let's do it in a way that is completely non-technical.
Sure.
What is Incredible Health, and why does it matter if you're explaining to someone at the shawarma stand on the corner?
Sure. All right. Hisham at the shawarma stand. You can't see. Hey, Hisham. I'm running a company.
What's up, boss?
What's up? I run a company called Incredible Health. It's a software company that has a desire to help healthcare professionals live better lives. The reason this matters is because we are in the midst of a massive healthcare labor shortage. The U.S. healthcare system is very heavily taxed, right? Our demand for healthcare as a country keeps growing as our population ages and as our population grows, but we do not have enough workers in the system to fill that demand. In fact, in the next few years, we're going to be 1 million nurses short. We're going to be 500,000 allied health professionals short.
What's an allied health professional?
Sorry, that's a technician, and so that's why this matters. And we need to make it easier for more Americans to go into healthcare, and for those that are already in healthcare, we need to make it easy to expand opportunities for them, because it's important to the U.S. healthcare industry, which is now the most labor-intensive industry in the country. It employs 1 in 8 Americans, and it's a system that's under severe strain right now.
I think it's really well put. And again, I've been following your journey for a long time now, and I'm not going to get too technical, but there was so many other companies trying to tackle the shortage. Some were looking at temporary nursing staffing, and it was a crowded field, and you emerged as a winner. What do you think you did? Was it how you tackled the hiring model? Was it having hospitals applying to nurses? What do you think helped you kind of get ahead of the competition, which are well backed? They also had hundreds of millions of funding and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it was probably several different factors. First is, yes, the model that we had was definitely unique. And that's sort of a common theme I definitely want to sort of explain. That if you are in entrepreneurship, regardless of what field, what you come up with literally has to be at least 10 times better than what's already out there. And that could be better, cheaper, more compliant, faster, however you want to describe better. That's the only way to cut through all of the noise. So first was, yes, our model was that the employers apply to the healthcare workers instead of the other way around. So we really flipped the model on its head. And as you can imagine, the workers love that. They created a profile, they sit back and relax, they get interviews from different employers. The worker gets to choose which interviews to accept or decline. They've never felt like in that level of control before. Another part of our success was focusing on the permanent workforce instead of the temporary workforce. 95% of healthcare workers work in permanent jobs, not in temporary jobs. They are like many of us in this room. They have homes, they have families, they have careers. They do not want to move around every 6 weeks or every 3 months. And then it was very aligned with what both groups needed, right? Healthcare workers want stability. They want the ability to make more money, to advance their careers, to expand their opportunities, to relocate to other parts of the country. And the same for the employers. If you are an employer in healthcare, you cannot have 90% of your staff be temporary. You need the majority of them to actually be permanent, because that's the only way to deliver patient care consistently. You also can't spend on temporary labor, which is at least 2-3 times more expensive than your permanent labor. And for those of you who are familiar with healthcare, like hospitals and so on run on very low margins. So those additional labor costs are just really not an option. And then finally, just assembling an amazing team. And I'm not just referring to the team that we employ, but having amazing investors, including Andreessen Horowitz, including Andre Iguodala, just leaders in their field, investing in the company. And I would definitely say that being based in San Francisco had major advantages too. That ecosystem is a special ecosystem in tech. You have access to amazing talent, amazing investors. You're interacting with people that are the best in their fields when it comes to tech. So being there was important too.
And I just want to highlight, 10 years ago when you were kind of framing all of these solutions you came up with, these were pretty radical ideas. People weren't doing this. They weren't focusing on permanent nursing. They weren't flipping the hiring model on its head. It might seem obvious and straightforward today, but these are some pretty pioneering ideas that you came up with back then. So I just want to make sure I highlighted that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the other, theme that you guys probably have heard from the other panelists as well, and I'll repeat it, is like there's no such thing as overnight success. Okay, like this took years and years and years. Like I'm like, okay, $1 billion company, but you know what? Like there was 2 years without salary. There was a pandemic in the middle of that. There was interest rate hikes. There was regulatory changes. There was so many setbacks. It took many, many years, enormous amount of resilience, tons of ups and downs to get to where we are today. And that's a theme echoed by the other panelists too. Like there is no such thing as overnight success. It requires an enormous amount of hard work and resilience to be successful.
And I like you touched on the ups and downs, both in the early days, even to now. What would you say were some of the hardest moments where you generally questioned whether this would work or if it's continuing to work or so on and so forth?
Okay, hands down, the hardest moment actually was before we created Incredible Health. This is not actually that well known, so I'll share the story with you all. Rome and I, same co-founder, and I actually started a completely different business before Incredible Health. And that was a complete failure, right? It doesn't even matter it was a software company as well. And it was just the two of us. We built this product, launched it, and had a few hundred users, but it just wasn't growing, right? It wasn't growing. It had a little bit of revenue, but that wasn't growing either. And we toiled on it for a year, right? So that was a year of our lives just kind of with nothing to show for it. And we made the decision to shut that down and create what is now Incredible Health. I think that there were a few, lessons learned from that I'd love to share. One is just the importance of ideation when you're an entrepreneur. What you actually choose to work on matters a lot. We focus a lot on execution and all. We talk a lot about execution and hard work and so on. But what you actually choose to do matters a lot. It's like a ship leaving a harbor. You want to make sure that you're pointed in the right directions and you don't end up someplace random. And I probably have learned a few things about ideation. first is, what market are you in? Are you in a market that is massive, a multi-billion-dollar market where even if you just capture 1% of it or less, it's still going to be a massive success. Also, competition. Understand your competition really well. Like, there will be competition. There's going to be smaller companies. There's going to be big public companies. There has to be some, because otherwise it isn't a market, right? And most importantly, like, what is your unique insight? What have you come up with that is at least 10 times better than what's already out there? Hopefully 100 times better. You could argue that an app like Uber is probably 100 times better than taxis, for those of you that remember what the world was like then. You really have to come up with a unique insight, and it's okay, like, come up with 100 ideas and make sure that they're meeting those filters for market, competition, and unique insight. And do that before you spend, a year or thousands of dollars or whatever it is building what you want, right? So I feel like the ideation piece isn't talked about enough, and as founders, as entrepreneurs, we don't spend enough time on ideation. We go straight to execution, and you can end up someplace very random. So I just want to share that failure.
I think it's really great advice. And, so you went from your funnel of 100 ideas, you picked your idea, you executed. Was there a moment in which you said, whoa, this might actually work? Was there an inflection point where you thought the company might actually succeed? And what was that?
Yeah, it was probably in 2019. So we were 2 years into building it, and the results were really just starting to flow through. What I'm referring to is, we were getting healthcare workers hired in days instead of months. We were hearing stories from employers about how we saved them millions of dollars per year, because by hiring the permanent workers faster from Incredible Health, they were able to save on overtime costs and premium labor and other costs that they were incurring. It was the stories from the healthcare workers, saying this is the highest I've ever been paid. The average salary increase for workers that go through Incredible Health is a 17% salary increase. Workers saying, they're from Iowa, and like, my dream was to move to Washington, D.C., and I didn't know where to start, how to get there, but Incredible Health made it happen. 40% of those hired on the platform are actually relocating from a different state. It was the stories of, I'm an oncology nurse and I really want to advance in my career, and I got this amazing job at Johns Hopkins and I can keep advancing as an oncology nurse. It was stories like that where I was like, okay, like, there's something here.
That's awesome. And you did mention a few times now your co-founder Rome, and we are in a room called the Founders Library, right, which is named after the 17 founders of Howard University, which is a lot. And as someone who's built before, working with founders is challenging. Picking the right co-founder is hard. I think this is a concept many of us as Sudanese people understand. Our dads got into business relationships with relatives or business partners, or fought over land back in Sudan. But who you do business with really, really matters. You mentioned that you and Rome had a failed venture together at some point. And then also you've been working together for 10 years, right? It's a very intimate relationship. Tell us a little bit about that, how that's changed or how you've navigated that relationship.
Yeah, I would say the relationship with Rome, the reason it's been successful is because it started as a working relationship, right? Like, we were coworkers. We were both employees at a startup. I was a product manager, he was a software engineer, and we worked together for 3 years building products before founding anything. And that was the foundation of the relationship. It de-risked the relationship because we knew we could get things done, right? Look, I'm never going to tell anyone who to co-found their businesses with, right? But there is risk you're taking on if you're doing it with a friend or a family member. That there's some real risk there. And I think, I'm not sure the exact stat, but it's something like 50% of startups fail in their first, 90% of startups fail in their first 2 years, and 50% of the reason why is because of co-founder drama. So it's actually the most important decision that you make is who you build a business with. Because at the end of the day, ideas are going to change. We pivoted, right? Ideas are going to change, markets are going to change, products are going to change, but who you're actually doing business with, who you're building it with, doesn't change. So just put a lot of thought into who you're building a business with, and complementary skill sets help. We definitely have very, very different skill sets, and together we're stronger. And the other thing is, it's just there's a lot you need to do to maintain that relationship too. So just we both have executive coaches, right? I'm part of a very big CEO, I'm part of several CEO support groups. He's part of several CTO support groups. So all of that matters in building a great relationship and building a great company.
And we talked in the last panel about a day-to-day, but on a day-to-day, even on a week-to-week or month-to-month basis, you're facing an overwhelming number of problems. How do you prioritize? How do you figure out what you need to focus on? What is, burning platform, day zero stuff you need to focus on, and stuff that can wait?
Okay, at any given time, there is going to be a number one problem that is the biggest bottleneck or blocker to progress at the company, right? And my goal is that every week I tackle whatever that top problem is. And if I can go, 50 weeks a year solving the top problems at the company, then we're effectively unstoppable. That problem, it varies, right? Sometimes it's product, sometimes it's sales, sometimes it's a team related or people related. And so I have a very, varying week to week, but ruthless prioritization on whatever is the top problem is important.
How many employees do you have today?
We have 70.
So still pretty lean.
Pretty lean. We're big believers in AI. We can talk about that too. But yeah.
And we'll get into that a little bit. But starting from a startup where it was just you and Rome kind of chalkboarding to kind of leading this large enterprise that does millions, tens of hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, how has your role as CEO evolved? We see oftentimes as companies get bigger, you see boards of companies replace CEOs or push them out or say they need people with more experience. You're a Black woman that's coming into this role. How did your leadership style or your skills evolve over time, and how did you kind of fight those pressures not to have people take over and tell you what to do with your own company?
Okay, so a theme that was echoed in every panel today was the importance of focusing on your professional development, right? Your skills, your learning. I'd say that's definitely the same. That definitely applies to me. When a company is growing this rapidly, my role as CEO probably changes. The definition of the role changes every 3 to 6 months. And that means I have to very intensely focus on my professional development. So for example, I've had to learn how to hire, how to fundraise, how to sell, how to build product, how to drive growth. Like these are all very important skills that have to be rapidly obtained in just as quickly as possible. Now, I didn't do it on my own, right? So I loved the comment earlier about mentorship. I certainly have advisors and mentors. I am part of several CEO support groups. I work with some great venture capital firms like Andreessen Horowitz that provides quite a lot of support to CEOs. I have executive coaching. Like there's just, I read, there's the blogs and everything available online and the podcasts and all of that. Like it is just really important to just keep expanding your skills in order to just make sure you're keeping up. And for me, I had to. Like I am the biggest bottleneck in the company at the end of the day. Like if I don't keep up, then I'm going to be the person who's slowing it down. And so it's just a relentless focus on skills and learning.
Work never stops.
Never stops.
So you touched on this, every company in the world is now pretending to be an AI company or saying they're AI this, AI that. But we also have seen this rapid acceleration of AI adoption, not just in patient and clinical care, but in operations and hiring and so on and so forth. How has that shift influenced how you think about Incredible Health's product and your long-term strategy?
Yeah, so let's talk about the products and customers first, and then we'll talk about the team. So we were in December 2023, we're the first company in healthcare hiring to launch AI products. And since then, we've shipped many features and multiple products, including AI voice agents. The way the way I think about AI is that it really is the most important technology trend of our generation. It is bigger than the internet, and it is fundamentally going to change the U.S. economy. And again, I know like some of you might be looking at me like, oh, this girl from Silicon Valley, you know, what's she talking about? But like, guys, this is a very real phenomenon, and we've really leaned into it very hard from a product standpoint. So for example, we have an AI voice agent named Lynn. Lynn can do an entire interview, including asking clinical and behavioral questions, including selling what makes an employer an amazing place to work, including discussing multiple jobs that are available at that employer in that interview. That is something that human recruiters cannot do consistently. And the voice agent is available 24/7, which means the healthcare workers love it because now they can do interviews at night, they can do interviews on the weekends. The interviews are now done within, like 75% of the interviews are happening the same day the healthcare worker applies, as opposed to waiting, 12 days to speak to a recruiter, which is the traditional way of doing it. It's now a world where, healthcare recruiters today, the humans, are able to speak with maybe 10 or 20% of those that apply. But imagine a world where an AI voice agent is speaking with 100% of the workers that apply. And then let's talk about productivity, where with that voice agent alone, we're saving 800 hours per hospital recruiter per year. That's 1 or 2 months of their time saved by using an agent. All of that has enormous implications on healthcare hiring for both the workers and for the employers. And that's an example, just one agent, we have several now, right? I would say like one of the most important things we did at Incredible Health is it was a top-down mandate that's effectively, like if I was to summarize it, it's like AI or die, okay? Or AI or buy, right? You must, I would say, certainly as a tech worker, but I would extend that to the entire US economy. If you are working, you must adapt your skills and you have to embrace AI in your day-to-day work. It is fundamentally going to change every single job in this country, whether it's a blue-collar job or a white-collar job or what, I don't care what field you're in, right? This technology is fundamentally going to change how you do your work. And there's a lot of headlines about job losses and so on. There shouldn't be, I would encourage everyone there shouldn't be fear around this technology. You should embrace it. And it's so important to upskill and reskill and be AI native and AI forward in your field, or else you will be out of a job. And I say that with I'm not trying to instill fear or anything like that, right? But I'm just trying to be real with you guys. I'm in rooms with a lot of CEOs, public company CEOs, private company CEOs, et cetera. Like they are actively reinventing their workforces. And for those that are not embracing AI, you are out the door. Because right now, all our interview guides are changing. They've already changed. So let's just take a profession. Let's take the design profession. So when you interview a designer today, you're like, please share your screen and show me how you build a prototype with Claude Code in front of me. Share your screen and show me how you're checking in code. I don't care that you don't write code. You're a designer now, product manager, marketer, doesn't matter. The new programming language is English. So show me how you're checking in code. Show me how you're building a prototype. Here's a list of processes, design processes. Show me how you're going to reinvent them with AI. Those are the interviews today. And again, what I'm talking about might be, those are the interviews of companies based in the Bay Area, but pretty soon those are going to be the interviews of every company in America. Right? So it really is such a fundamental change, and it's going to be even bigger than the internet.
And I wholeheartedly agree. I think the most important thing that new parents or this kind of younger generation can focus on is getting really fluent in these tools. The way that we were able to use computers when our parents couldn't, ordering stuff on Amazon and so on and so forth, or sending emails for them. I think they need to be fluent in the Claudes and Perplexities and ChatGPTs and so on and so forth. And I did kind of want to move on to kind of a bigger topic of identity and representation. We're in Howard University, historically Black university here. This building used to house the Howard University School of Law. A lot of the work that was done to fight the case of the Brown versus Board of Education was done in this building. A lot of us have benefited in this room. A lot of us have benefited from that. We've gone to schools here. You trained at Wharton. You're one of very few Black female founders that has built a $1 billion company. Did that reality affect your journey in Silicon Valley?
I mean, the answer is yes. Look, the statistics are pretty bad, right? When it comes to private investing, whether it's venture capital or private equity, 1% of it goes to African or African American founders. 0.3% of it goes to African or African American female founders. 0.3% is effectively zero, okay? It's rounding, it's zero. And so the statistics are really, really bad. But to be honest, like, we actually have to compartmentalize and not think about how bad the statistics are. And ultimately, we just gotta go for it. You gotta have a big vision, a big mission, huge dreams, and just go for it. Like, you have to be really assertive in what you're trying to get done, and just power through. Now, I was definitely strategic about it. So, for example, let's take the topic of fundraising. I only approached investors who already had a track record of investing in women or investing in African American founders. Like, if you were an investor who I would have been the first. I'm like, I'm not going to waste my time there, right? So it's important to be strategic and thoughtful about it, but it definitely did shape the journey. And I'm happy, I'd love to tell the story of Chad, if that's okay. So for everyone, right? We all have like raging imposter syndrome, in some way, right? And so, in the early years, I'd be so nervous. As a CEO, you're often put in a position where you need to selling to healthcare executives, selling to, a star software engineer to join your team, or selling to the press, or just always selling, right? And so like it was like nerve-wracking in those early days. And I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna create an alter ego for myself, right? And because I had read about this tactic, Beyonce has Sasha Fierce, Lady Gaga has Jill Calderone, because they would get very bad stage fright. And so they'd create these alter egos for themselves, and so I did the same. And so I named my alter ego Chad, right? And Chad is like a white guy, 6 feet tall, blonde hair, blue eyes. His last 4 generations of his company went to the Ivy League. He went to high school, like Phillips, Exeter, Andover, I don't know, these schools you guys have in the East Coast. Chad is like the epitome of American privilege. I know you all know what I'm talking about because you all work with Chads, right? So Chad, when he walks into a room, like not only owns the room, owns the building, owns the entire block, right? Like enormous confidence. Even if Chad is only like half competent, right? And so I'm like, okay, for the next 60 minutes, I'm not gonna be Iman, I'm gonna be Chad, right? And so then the call starts or the meeting starts, and I'm just speaking with an enormous amount of assertiveness and confidence, and I'm getting it done. And now, look, this was in the beginning, right? Obviously, over the years, Chad plus Iman 1.0 has become Iman 2.0, so I don't need Chad anymore, right? But that's a tactic I used in the early days. And at the end of the day, if you have 100% competence, and so many people in this room are so competent in their fields, and then you combine that with 100% confidence, then you are literally unstoppable. You can beat the Chads, because a lot of the Chads, as you guys know, are 100% confident, but only 50% competent, right? But if you're 100% competent and 100% confident, you are unstoppable.
I love it. So we have a few questions left, and then we'll go to a quick Q&A. But you told us a little bit about Chad, but let's go from Chad to Marghani or Saadia. These are founders or aspiring leaders who they don't fit the traditional mold of who's supposed to succeed in this country or in this world. What would you tell them?
Create an alter ego. Preston, Dylan, you name them, whoever you want. No, but joking aside, like I look at the end of the day, we are an amazing diaspora, right? Like we can do anything we put our minds to. One of the most influential people that I admire is Beyonce. I still remember the Homecoming documentary on Netflix. It's her Coachella documentary. And there's a line in it where she says, "Look, I'm just from a regular middle class family in Houston, and so if I can do it, you can do it too." Right? And that's just something for all of us to remember. Like we're all just like regular people from regular families, but we're capable of excellence and greatness.
Amen. We have all age groups in this room right now, but also a lot of really young folks. And I wanted to ask, if you're starting over at 25, what would you focus on?
The thing I would focus on is really just the expansion of skills and learning. At the end of the day, like the world is becoming more competitive, right? And standing out is becoming harder. So not only do you have to have a deep expertise in your domain, but you also have to expand your skills beyond your domain, right? We talked about the AI topic. You earlier heard about the importance of social media, about the importance of network, community, finding mentors. Like it's really just a constant thing that we have to keep up with. And so that's probably the number one sort of lesson I'd say to anyone who's young. One other thing I'll mention is just like sometimes I speak with younger people and they're saying, "Hey, I'm doing this and I'm trying to." I guess I just wanted to share like a framework for how I think about careers. There's probably only one or two of three things that you can actually optimize for, right? The first is cash, the second is skills and learning, and then the third is lifestyle. And so if you're really trying to maximize cash as quickly as possible, then there's probably fields that help you do that. Like go into finance, go become an investment banker, private equity investor, hedge fund, et cetera. Like, yeah, that's a way to maximize cash. You're definitely going to compromise on skills and learning and lifestyle though, right? And so let's say you want to optimize skills and learning. Then yeah, entrepreneurship, and whether you're starting a company or joining a very small company, like you're going to learn an enormous amount in a very short period of time. Like that is a way to optimize skills and learning one way. But you're probably going to compromise on things like cash in the short term, right? And lifestyle, certainly. And then if you want to maximize lifestyle, then yeah, just go join a big corporation, be a cog in the machine, work from 11 to 2, and effectively it's like an early retirement, right? Not that there's anything wrong with that, but if that's what you want to optimize, then go optimize that. Young people sometimes try to confuse things. They're like, okay, if I do this, then I'm going to get cash and lifestyle and skills and learning. It's like, you know what? There's no such thing. Like, you can only truly optimize for, I'd say, for one of those, maybe two of those, but you're never going to get all three all at once. And so just be really thoughtful about what you're choosing to do with your time and how you're thinking about your career. And just be aware of what you're actually selecting and what you're truly prioritizing.
Yeah, I love that answer. And, as we close here, I kind of wanted to give you kind of a two-part closing question. We're all part of a Sudanese diaspora here. All of us, or many of us, have roots to Sudan. We've seen so many incredible people who've started ventures, companies, different types of businesses and partnerships. How do you think the diaspora can bring it back to Sudan and contribute to Sudan or Sudanese people in meaningful ways? And then the second part of that question is kind of looking at that really young Sudanese person, what would you want them to hear from you today if they have this dream or vision of building something really, really big?
Okay, love those questions. Look, I think the panelists earlier gave some amazing answers for how we can contribute to Sudan and the Sudanese community. I think the one thing I would add to what our amazing panelists already shared is just be successful. Like just be the best you can be in your chosen field. Right. Because if you just do that, you become a role model. right? And representation matters, right? Being a role model, being an inspiration to more Sudanese people is important. And to add to that, it's not enough to just do. You got to show, right? So doing is being, the best in your field, working hard, getting a lot of stuff done, but then you also have to show, right? So maybe that means speaking on panels in your given field. Maybe that means doing podcasts in your given field. Maybe means having a social media presence. But it's really important to show, right? And the truth is, when you are doing and showing, you're actually expanding your luck surface area, and all kinds of serendipity is going to happen, and a lot of good things are going to come to you. And then also, while doing and showing, you are really representing yourself, your community, and you're being a role model to everybody who's watching. And so really the most important thing is just be successful in your chosen field.
I love that. Thank you. Give it up for Iman Abuzeid, everyone. And we have an encore.
Okay, so the other thing I think is really important is we got to study other immigrant communities. I mean, really, when you look at the Irish American community, the Italian American community, the Jewish American community, the Nigerian American community, they all have similar patterns, right? So, there was a first wave of more blue collar workers because they didn't know the language or they didn't have their credentials weren't recognized, who end up doing blue collar work, right? And then there's the next state, their generation, the generation below them, that become the professionals, the doctors, the engineers. And I know we all poked fun at our parents earlier, yes, that's the group that is going for very safe careers that are, low risk, engineering, lawyers, software engineers, etc. And then the stage after that are the creatives and the entrepreneurs who end up creating enormous success, right? And I would say that's where we're at as a community. And that's just an amazing time for us as a Sudanese community. We really can be leaders of our field. We can be creative. We can be entrepreneurs. And the Jewish community were not, they weren't allowed to be employed in the hospital, so they created their own hospitals. They weren't allowed to be employed in the banks. They created their own banks. I mean, this university, they weren't allowed. African Americans weren't allowed to pursue to pursue educational opportunities. They created their own universities. So I'm really looking forward to our community building amazing enterprises in every field, and just making the most of the opportunity we have. I would say that I'm saying that to the entire Sudanese community, but especially those of you who are Sudanese Americans living in this country. This entire country is designed to maximize opportunities. So seize it, let's go for it, and we can really make it happen.
All right. First check is coming from the man. We'll do a Q&A. I'll let Khalid lead it. But do you have time for a couple questions? Yeah. Okay, so let's open it up for a Q&A here. Here, Khalid, go ahead.
Sorry, guys. I think as somebody who's kind of, a few steps behind, has been a consultant, who's currently a product manager, and kind of in that safe career space that you're talking about, how do you build that conviction to take the plunge, start your own thing, build up that risk appetite?
Yeah, I love that question. I mean, my answer is that you just got to start. There is no perfect time. You just have to get started. And there are successful entrepreneurs who started when they're 20, when they're 30, when they're 50. There is no ideal time, ideal moment, ideal path. You just have to get started. You have to be okay with some failure, and you have to be incredibly resilient. For me personally, I needed enough savings to feel good about it, right? Because I knew there was going to be a couple years without salary. I needed to be in the Bay Area because of what I wanted to do, and I needed the right co-founder. So all the stars needed to align for me to start. But everyone's story is going to be different. For what you need, a certain number, 2 or 3 stars need to align for you to start, and you just go for it.
I love that. Shit, I want to be you when I grow up. All right, let's go, Fadi.
Hi, my name is Fadis. I just have one quick question. You mentioned upping your skills and always keeping up with that in your career. So for someone like me as a first year medical student, what do you think I should be focused on, upping my skills in AI medicine particularly? And a 2-part question, what are the biggest opportunities you see for physicians in the next 5 to 10 years?
Love that question. Okay, I guess both Hisham and I probably know a lot of physicians, right? And medical students. And at the end of the day, it just comes down to your interests. Like, of course, you got to do, you know, I encourage you to finish medical school, right? And get the MD because of the credibility thing that I mentioned earlier. But if your interests are in design, then go into, expand your field there. If your interests are more tech related, then go into there. Maybe your interests are more finance related. And so we know, both Hisham and I know physicians that have pursued all kinds of careers. Some are investment bankers, some are entrepreneurs, some are, creatives on social media. Like there's just a whole range of them. And especially if you're here in this country, like the world is your oyster. So it really just comes down to your interests and pursuing that, additional domain beyond just medicine.
All right, amazing. Thank you very much. I really wish we could go more questions. I know this could go all day, but we do have to be out of this room by 6. So we do have to end it there. I do encourage you, if you have burning questions, like I said, please reach out to Iman. We have a little bit of time as people are wandering out of here. But I think it's been really great to hear from you, Iman. It's very inspiring. And thank you, Hisham, for making this a great conversation. It's been a pleasure.